Welcome back to the 13th Annual Health Current Virtual Summit and Trade Show. For those of you just joining us, I'm Christy Dye, Chief Business Development Officer here at Health Current, and I'm really pleased to introduce the next session, the next generation of healthcare data integration, sponsored by Nextgen Healthcare.
Excellent. Hello, everyone. My name is Mohammed Shibli. I'm the Vice President of Solutions here at Nextgen. And today's session, this next generation of Health Data Hub, we're going to talk about our new platform. I'm also joined today by Curtis Bailey. Curtis Bailey is one of our solution engineers here at Nextgen. Curtis has been working in interoperability and healthcare data exchange for more than 10 years, and he has deep familiarity with our platform, integration engines, HIEs, and all the things that make data exchange necessary and effective. I'm really excited about this session because we get a chance to talk to you today about our platform, HealthDataHub. And this is a platform that Keith and Melissa earlier in yesterday's introduction teased out as HIE 3.0. And I'm really excited about having the chance to walk you through what is this platform, how does it work, what are some of its key features and functions, and I want to dig in specifically to one of the strongest areas of our application, which I consider our data protection features, those tools and capabilities that enable HIE administrators to control who has access to what data, when, how is it shared, and how do we comply with regulations like 42 CFR Part 2. And then at the end of this session, I'm going to leave enough time for Curtis to walk us through a live demonstration and show you what the platform actually looks like. So we're really excited about having this opportunity to join you today. I want to kick it off by really reminding myself and hopefully introducing all of you to this really important quote. And I think it applies very well to the business, the function, and really the theory of HIEs. In today's environment, hoarding knowledge ultimately erodes your power. If you know something very important, the way to get power is by actually sharing it. In a lot of ways, you know, this could be the rallying cry for HIEs, right? This is not, we don't aggregate data, right, just for the purpose of building up stores of information about people, but we actually build a patient's record, we aggregate clinical content so that other people can access it at the point of care and get the benefit of the combined knowledge about patients. It really, I like to remind myself of this quote because this is not just a race to see who can have the biggest data set. That's not what's important. What's important is the actual interaction of exchanging a patient's record so that providers and caregivers can use that information to actually improve patient outcomes. And this platform that we're going to talk about today, HealthDataHub, is really one of the broad set of interoperability capabilities. And I'm sure when you think about Nextgen, you might think that, well, we're just an EMR company and we have, you know, a pretty substantial, you know, platform for, you know, clinical records, documentation in our EHR software. And, you know, in Arizona and Colorado and all across the country, we have a pretty substantial EHR user base, but really a pretty substantial part of our business, another substantial part of our business is national interoperability. And today we support HIEs across the country. I'm really proud to say that, and I'm sure if you've been attending this conference, you've heard me say in that video loop, how proud I am that we at Nextgen get to support Health Current in data aggregation and data exchange. But it's just one aspect of the many different things that we do. We have an open source integration engine called Connect. You might know it as Mirth Connect. Mirth Connect is one of the only open source integration engines available completely for free. And it supports FHIR and HL7v2 messages and allows you to ingest and share things like CCDAs or DICOM images and all kinds of really exciting and complicated data exchange solutions. In fact, Keith yesterday, when he was speaking about, the local integration engine capabilities of HealthCurrent, he identified that as kind of the number one asset is the ability for HealthCurrent to manage integration engine interfaces locally. But today, the solution that I'm going to focus on is HealthDataHub, which falls into this data aggregation capability that we're going to talk about today. What is HealthDataHub? Well, HealthDataHub is really our platform for building and sharing clinical records with, a big picture goal for us to say that when you aggregate clinical data, you can turn community-wide patient information into insights that improve care. Going back to that first quote about, not hoarding data for the purpose of hoarding it, but for the purpose of sharing it. And this is a platform that we've redesigned from the ground up. The platform HealthCurrent, HIE 2.0 was our results CDR platform, which served the Arizona market for many years before this migration to HealthDataHub, which allows for greater scalability, greater throughput of transactions, and a broader set of interoperability capabilities. And it's our goal with this solution to really address what I say are the evolving requirements of information management. And if you think back, if you've been an attendee at the HealthCurrent Summit for years now, and if you've seen the growth of HealthCurrent over the many years, you can kind of see the same trajectory playing out. That when we first started in the HIE business, more than 10 years ago now, it was sufficient at that time to simply support point-to-point data exchange, right? Getting data from A to B solved the problem for the vast majority of organizations. And the market and HealthCurrent itself has gone through this trajectory of, moving past centralized HIE, federating to other networks, as we've already seen. And HealthCurrent is at the point where intelligent information exchange is what's actively happening, where it's rules-based. It's using curated data. It's relying on the underlying core quality of the content. And the staff at HealthCurrent goes to great lengths to ensure that meds are coded properly and diagnosis codes and procedures and all of these are coded values are usable to automate the sharing of clinical content. And this intelligent information exchange is where the rest of the market is going. It's a matter of ensuring that we're not just doing document shipping from A to B, but we're delivering actionable insights into that point of care. And so for us, we needed to design a platform that was faster, smarter, easier to activate, and easier to build seamless integrations into current software and current platforms. And that's where we get to HealthDataHub. It's our platform for building out this clinical record for a patient. It has included in it seamless patient identification management, or as the industry calls it, an EMPI, an Enterprise Master Person Index. So that when we're talking about a John Smith patient, we can match that John Smith to a Jonathan Smith from another network or from another data source, that we can speak about the same patient intelligently and not have to create duplicate records. But in the platform, we have the ability to recognize and deliver all of the rich clinical content that is actively in use between ambulatory and inpatient care settings. So that includes what's known as the US CDI, the US Core Data for Interoperability, the vocabulary and clinical content that is required by 21st Century Cures, that's required by what used to be called Meaningful Use, the Promoting Interoperability Program. So HealthDataHub recognizes all of that clinical content types and also supports the ability to attach and manage unstructured documents around a patient's record. With this platform, and speaking to that number one strength that Keith mentioned, is the ability to integrate and automate with all of the different inbound and outbound interfaces that an HIE needs to operate. And for this, HealthCurrent today uses the Nextgen Connect integration engine, which has the full mapping of the HealthDataHub API. So Nextgen Connect allows HIE administrators at HealthCurrent to build fast interfaces that bring in data. An organization like this provider, EHR maybe requires a CCDA, and this hospital maybe supports HL7 V2 messages, and this provider's EHR maybe uses a FHIR-based interface. So all of these different interfaces can be, and today are, customized for the needs of that specific data source, and of course, fully automated to get data into and out of the platform. And most importantly, that Melissa and her entire team have gone to great lengths to ensure that the data is secure in the platform, that providers, hospitals, and third-party apps and services can have rules-based access to the clinical content. And this is one of the key aspects of HealthDataHub, is rules that are established to control things like consent, patient access, provider level access, and other types of permissions are not only enforced through the user interface of the application, but are also enforced through the API. So if we get data into and out of the system, that data exchange is going to follow the same sets of rules that we establish for whether or not a user can see that data in the user interface or not. You don't have to duplicate the work or the logic. The system can enforce those permissions and configurations regardless of how the data is accessed. And built into the platform is the ability to connect, most importantly these days, to the national networks that you care about. So today, a lot of organizations are active on Sequoia for the eHealth Exchange, or Care Quality, the national network for querying and retrieving patient data. You've also heard a lot about the Patient-Centered Data Home, the HIE initiative that enables HIEs to query one another. Of course, many organizations today use direct messaging to share data between providers for transitions of care and referrals. So HealthDataHub has the ability to activate these national network connectivities pretty easily and really quickly. And finally, our whole argument with this platform, and going back to that need to share data across organizations, our whole purpose with this platform is that once you've built a robust network like HealthCurrent has, one of the key things that you can drive off of that network and off of that data exchange and data aggregation is the ability to do analytics. And this is where we think a huge, robust source of clinical content for analytics is really vital. And if you as an organization, or if HealthCurrent as an organization, or the new combined Choreo and HealthCurrent marry this clinical content to, let's say, paid claims feeds from insurance companies, marrying the financial and the clinical data in an analytics platform would give really the richest view of high-risk patients and who are the most costly to treat and so on. So this is kind of the intention, and sorry for the long-winded explanation of what this platform is. The intention behind it is to deliver a set of capabilities that allow organizations to build and manage care records. And for end users in the community who are going to be accessing this data, right, for the providers on the call and for the physicians and nurses in the room, the benefits to you are that you have the ability to have trust in the record that you're accessing, this longitudinal record aggregated from multiple sources, that when you and your staff view that record, whether it's embedded in your EHR or delivered to your EHR or you're logging into the portal, that record is going to be complete, it's going to be secure, that you could share that record as needed with other providers and organizations, that it's going to have enforced already upon it the consent and data protection settings that have been configured by HealthCurrent and its staff, and that it will be accessible to you whenever you need it, because we've hosted the platform in a secure, scalable way where you have access to it at any time. And whether there's a million people on the record, or sorry, a million people on the network, or two, that it's always available because we've deployed the platform in such a way to make that easy and sustainable. It's our goal with HealthDataHub that one of the most important parts in our design decisions was ensuring data fidelity, that every bit of a patient's record, every single data point on that patient's record, that it has provenance, that we know exactly where that record came from, which data source contributed this medication, or when was this consent form signed by the patient, who submitted this lab result. All of the data on the network and in the platform has data fidelity, that we can trace every message back to its original API call. And this simplifies the process where, with any robust application that's doing patient identity management, you often need to merge and unmerge patients, right? You need to combine records or break them apart if they're incorrectly merged. So data fidelity features of provenance not only prepare you for the 21st century cures requirements that now include provenance as a requirement, but also from an administration perspective, let you really see where all the content comes from. And of course, we've made it a very usable platform. I've talked about the scalability, the configurability, and finally, open access, the ability with our API to get data into and out of the platform through a fully RESTful API. And Curtis is going to talk more about that in this next section, where he walks us through the features and architecture of HealthDataHub. So Curtis, let me turn it over to you and I will flip the slides for you.
Thanks, Mo. So I think a lot of the architecture and design of HealthDataHub brings us a lot of capabilities. The first key function is that it's an API first design methodology, which means that the very first thing we build when we build any piece of functionality into the system is we build the API call first. And so that means that the APIs are always up to date. They're the first piece of functionality before we build any other component, user interface, application, whatever it may be. The API is the first piece. Now, what this does is it hides internal complexity. It only shows you the data that you need by that particular API call, and it allows connections to ramp up more quickly when implementing new exchanges or interfaces. How this compares to other solutions is it allows you to do things like democratize data. I mean, I know a lot of us are waiting for the day when we can grab our cell phone and we can, have a QR code or something like that and have an app on our phone. And here we go. Here's my health record, Mr. Provider. Let me scan your QR code. And now you have access to my record. And so with APIs, that allows us to do things like that, where other companies who are good at that, that's their core competency, to plug right into our architecture and allow us to do that exact thing. It also allows for innovation, or what I like to call citizen science. And so what is citizen science? Well, there's plenty of providers out there that have great ideas about how to change workflow, how to optimize workflow, and at the end of the day, make better healthcare outcomes happen. But the problem is that they've always had the issue of getting to the data. They've always had to go through interfaces and things like that that are very cumbersome. You think about HL7 2.x or even CCDs. Hey, I'm really interested in medications, but here's a 32-page PDF that has everything we know about this patient. And so this innovation in citizen science allows us to, have incubators or different groups that can kind of throw things against the wall, see what sticks, see what works, but it makes the data available to them in such an easy way that they're able to do that without, high burdens of interfaces. The other thing is that it's rapid from the perspective of developing interfaces. I've never actually really liked the word interfaces. I think of them as connections, but we can more rapidly create those connections. The other thing is like I talked about with the CCD, you only get the necessary data that you're it only surfaces the necessary data that you're looking for. If you only want meds, problems, and allergies, you don't have to take 4 HL7 messages and combine them together, pick out the things you actually want. And like I said, with a CCD, you don't have to parse through all of the different sections of a CCD to find out the actual information that you're wanting to. You just go to the API and you say, hey, API, I would really like just meds, problems, and allergies, and within this particular time box. And that allows us to pull that data in. Now, with this easy access to data, it does bring more responsibility. It requires enhanced security, which we've built into the platform, but it's also going to require enhanced security on us as individual people, right? One thing I like to say is I love the idea of being able to grab my cell phone, have it right here, and do all that QR code stuff, right? But it means that I probably should be very protective of this data, because once it's given to me, my HIPAA protections go, away for the most part, right? I, as an individual, can disseminate my data, but healthcare providers cannot. And so now I have a greater burden as an individual user to secure that data, make sure that I'm not reusing passwords and I'm following those security guidelines that are given to us that most of us ignore, right? I mean, how many times have you reused a password that's already been, compromised on the internet and things like that? So, as we get to this point, there is going to be a requirement for enhanced security, and we as individuals have a part of that burden put upon us beyond just health information exchanges and providers of care. The other thing is that this is 21st century cures and TEFCA ready, right? Those are exactly the things that they talk about in those laws, that you have to, have APIs ready to go and things like that. And you have to support these specific APIs and whatnot. We're ready for that today. And so we can continue to innovate on other parts of the platform because we're not spending time on that. So if you want to go to the next slide, Mo. One of the other things to talk about is this is a true cloud solution, which means there's no hardware, software, middleware that has to be maintained. You just kind of buy and you're on the platform. And we've moved to what we call a continuous delivery pipeline, which means that we are releasing software with a high degree of confidence. We're doing multiple releases a week, adding small incremental pieces of features to it. And we're doing that with zero downtime. So this is much more like you would experience with a Hotmail, Gmail, something like that, that they may be adding features in the background, but no one has any idea because it just kind of shows up and you have the new and improved features. This is a little bit different than other solutions because it's built on a platform with microservices, meaning that, we don't have to scale to meet the highest capacity. If in the middle of the night, you get a lot of messages into your health information exchange and you have to plan for that, you don't have to be at, low utilization during the day and high utilization at night. You can scale all of those different pieces independently. The other thing that it allows us is increased release cycle flexibility. And this is what I like to call true agility. One of the issues with current platforms is that many of them, are stuck in a development cycle where they maybe release software, once or twice a year, maybe quarterly, and everybody has to wait for all of that software to be built, to be tested, to be implemented. Because of this, we have this true agility. I know that a lot of platforms really struggled in the time of COVID, right? Hey, we need you to be able to report this, 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 and this. And there were all kinds of people scrambling to get code put together to be able to do that. Because of the agility of our platform, we had the ability to build reports on the fly, to modify the software, to look at the data model and modify it so that we can better report on that in time as small as a window of 1 week. And so really this is an advantage to us because we are truly agile. I know there's a lot of people that say they're agile, but they still follow a water flow process. And this is a true agile system. The other thing that we did is we really focused on scalability. One thing we know is that the amount of data that HIEs are going to be required to work with and curate and deal with is not going to go down. It's going to go only up. And so these platforms need to be performant. They need to be always on, always available, always ready to give that data to providers so they can make the best decisions for their patients. And so we partnered with Amazon Web Services. We're taking advantage of the fact that they've spent billions of dollars to make sure that they have all of these different microservices out there that can be used, and it makes it available to us and our clients by virtue of that. We take advantage of public cloud economies of scale. One of the other things I talk about is, we are getting lots and lots of data, and normally in historic platforms, that would mean cost would go up, 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 and up. But because we're taking advantage of these scales, economies of scales in the public cloud, we can actually offer a lower price to everyone because, costs as far as storage and computing and things like that actually go down to us. We're also not dependent on cloud investment from a particular vendor. We can turn CPUs on and off without having to add any new hardware to our data center or anything like that. The other thing is that there's compartmentalized scaling instead of building for max capacity. So historically, many platforms required you to have, if you ever needed 24 CPUs, that means you had to have 24 CPUs built into your system. But with this, we can scale that independently when we need them. And so it allows us to even further economize those scales and offer a lower price. The other thing that we've done is we've changed to a model around event sourcing. And this is a little bit of a different way of looking at the world. We take data and we store it as a message, almost in what you would call a ledger system. And then we actually just keep metadata about that particular data. So if you had a lab report come in, we store that as a whole document, and then we take out metadata about it. We know this lab came from hospital A, it's from Miles Kaplan, it happened on this day, we know his gender code was this in the original one, and that's all stored in, quote, metadata. And then as we go through, we never actually change that. It becomes an indelible part of the record, and the only thing that changes is the metadata around that particular data element. It allows us to do things like that data provenance that Mo talked about. It deals with challenges around merging and moving and removing data, and it makes sure that the data that we present is as accurate as possible. It gives us a 100% reliable audit log, and that we can look at that audit log of data over time. And so how did things change for that piece of data from when we received it to when it showed up to Dr. A or Dr. B, or 6 years down the line when Dr. C looked at it. It allows us to have event publishing when data states change. So built into our system is a concept of alerting, that if something changed with that data and someone needs to know about it, the business rules just have to be created and we can start alerting for people automatically. It also fully takes advantage of the microservices architecture that we get from Amazon Web Services. And honestly, Amazon Web Services was built for this type of system where we have event logging and event sourcing systems. If you want to go to the next one, the other thing that we've changed is the way that we do our patient matching, so that we look at data between individual data sources. We reconcile within individual data sources. So if you want to go to the next build here, you have John Smith and John Smith, one from Quest and one from Hospital A. We're going to go ahead and link them together within their individual data sources and then do a higher level of patient matching. And so this allows us to do things like merges and unmerges very easily, because we're just looking at data from an individual data source perspective. And it allows us to look at that data, and if the John Smith that came from Quest was not the right John Smith that was from Hospital A, we can easily pull them apart, because it's really just a metadata link instead of a link directly in something that's more indelible, like a database or even those non-structured databases. And so with that, I think Mo from here is going to talk to us a little bit more about how we go about doing that data protection in HealthDataHub.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Curtis, for walking us through those features and seeing the time. I'm going to run through the data protection features, maybe the fastest I've ever run through it. And I'm going to give you as much time as I can at the end to do your demo. So I want to make sure we have time for your demo and for questions. I think one of the most important concepts to understand about how HealthDataHub works, so that you understand the level of access you'll have when you're looking at a patient's record. So if you think about what Curtis talked about with the event sourcing and the patient matching, we have this concept in HealthDataHub called a patient aggregate. And across patient records, going back to that John Smith, when data is submitted by John Smith's primary care physician, that's linked to a local patient record of that John Smith. And we always retain, remember that data provenance, we always retain the knowledge of where that data came from, those transactions for the local patient John Smith tied to this specific data source. And every data source is treated the same way in that it creates its own instance of that local patient record. All of this together, we call the patient aggregate, which is built up of the meds, the immunizations, the diagnosis codes, the procedures that are inside all of those transactions that came from each data source. And once we have this view of this patient aggregate, that's where we can begin adding our protection layers to that patient aggregate. One example of a layer is something we call data access constraints, which is the ability to control whether or not anyone can see this record by date range, by provider or provider group, by patient group, by data source or data source group. So I can grant access to a John Smith or a group of John Smith records just for the last 30 days. We could create users who can only access 30 days worth of data as a kind of a look back, calendar view. That's part of data access constraints. We also have the ability to establish confidentiality rules that are tied to the clinical vocabularies, CPT and SNOMED and ICD. So we can say that some diagnosis codes are very restricted, and user groups who do not have the very restricted permission can't see those ultra sensitive diagnosis codes. Think of that confidentiality as another layer of data protection. Then we have privileges. Can a user access this feature or that feature? Then we have consent. Has the patient given permission for a specific user to access that patient's record? That can be set up defaulted by data source or across the entire system. All of these permutations and all these layers can be rolled up into a user role that can then be assigned to clinical or administrative or functional users of the application. And users can of course have multiple roles depending on what they actually do within HealthDataHub. So all of these data protection features, how does that apply to patient aggregates? Well, one of the most important things that HealthCurrent has done and is going to expand and keep doing is with part 2 or sensitive data. So here in my example, if you think about a behavioral health data source or a substance use treatment center, HealthCurrent can identify those sources as protected sources. And then the data from those sources will be segmented within the patient aggregate such that only users who have access to this ultra or higher level of protected data will even know that that data exists. And that's where our patient aggregate, you can see, has a delineation of non-protected data versus protected data. And a user who has the role, right, of seeing protected data will get a combined view of the non-protected and the extra protected data. Whereas users who do not have that protected data view will never even know that this data exists because it's not available to them, not visible to them. And all of these different data protection layers work together to build out the end user experience that's completely seamless in the application. And I think that's a nice point where I can segue now to Curtis to actually show us this demonstration and bring up the HealthDataHub platform, give you a look at what's coming for the entire Arizona community, and will soon be available for clinical data searching and UI access. So Curtis, let me turn it over to you.
Thanks, Mo. And so, hit this last button here. Okay.
Excellent, and we can see your screen.
Perfect, great. And so with this is our user interface. There is a certain amount of customization that will probably be done by HealthCurrent, so it probably won't have our logo at the top. But this would represent the new portal for HIE 3.0, and it could be something completely different than this. That's one of the beauties of this system is that even though we have an interface that we've built, it may not fit all use cases. And so because of that open access API, other user interfaces can be placed right on top of the data platform. But today we'll talk to you a little bit about this one that's here as a default. So it all starts with a search, first name, last name, date of birth. Maybe you have a patient ID that you're looking for that particular patient. Maybe you need to give a reason to search for that. We also have the concept of advanced searching, which means that we can move beyond the concept of just demographics, first name, last name, date of birth. But maybe you're looking for groups of people that have particular results, taking particular medications, prescriptions, or have had immunizations within areas that are beyond demographics. So you're looking within a zip code or a county or some other demographic beyond that, and you're trying to get to those. So this is expanding some of those use cases beyond just the paradigm of a provider, but working with epidemiologists or researchers or other groups that may not have a particular patient in mind, but they're looking for patients that fit a particular mold. And so this allows us to expand beyond that in a rules-based, role-based perspective, allowing them to go beyond those paradigms of just, first name, last name, date of birth. So with that, we'll do a search. We'll come up with a list of patients that could meet your search criteria. In this case, we're going to go see my friend Joseph Bishop instead of all of his Marvel friends that live in here. And we're brought to what we call the patient summary. And so here within the patient summary, we have some light information about his demographics, and then we have what we call clinical item cards. And so these individual clinical item cards have different types of data, conditions, meds, problems, allergies, results. Each individual user has the ability to configure how they look, what column headers show up, and they have the ability to kind of make this their own view. And so with that, they can control what shows up there. They can dive deep into individual lab results and see them in what we call the timeline view here. So you would see all of the timeline of all of the different data that was here. In this case, Joseph Bishop only has one CBC test, but you'll be able to see that, see it linked to other encounters and things like that. The other piece that's important here is that you have the ability to filter. So we'll jump back to the patient summary here. We can look at demographics for our patient Joseph Bishop, insurance, identifiers, if he's a part of any patient groups. Also, we have the ability to do things like filtering. Because this is all based on APIs, filters that may be important to you are, hey, I want to know all data that's not from my hospital. So if I work at Good Health System, I can start typing in Good Health System, and I can say, go ahead and exclude any data from Good Health System, because I already have that in my EHR, and I don't need to see that in my search of the HIE. And with that, that would allow me to customize my view and see all of the different data that's out there from other data sources, not my own, and cut down on the amount of duplicate data that I may be looking at. Other things that are going to be really important is the ability to share. And so we can take documents here and we can send them directly to users' EHRs. We can send them to external systems. There's also the ability to send them as direct messages to those that may not be on the system as it sits here. And so a lot of fundamental functionality about, just because I have access to this data, how do I get it to people who may need to be able to be actioning upon it? And so with that, that's a real brief kind of introduction to the system. There'll be much more coming, and there'll be a lot of training and things like that, but certainly much to look forward to in our upcoming conversion to this. And so with this, I think we will cut back and take some questions that we
Thank you, Curtis. Yeah, I mean, that was a great shotgun demo of the system. And we do have some questions that have come in. So why don't we just jump right into it? First question is from Dave. One thing I've not heard much mentioned is this concept of standard terminologies. We all know we need to use RxNorm, Loink, SNOMED, etc. Do you see value of adding a staff terminologist to keep these up to date with various OIDs? Curtis, do you want to take that, or you want me to chime in first?
Yeah, I mean, go ahead first, and I'll add some color commentary.
Absolutely. So one of the key things about a cloud offering is that, your vendor can do a lot of heavy lifting to keep your standard terminologies up to date. And so we've partnered with First Data Bank, which is our source for medication, RxNorm, and NDC codes, and also immunization things like CVX codes, to get those vocabularies. And it's our goal to keep those updated on behalf of customers. That's a feature that we're rolling out over the next few months. So in about a month and a half to 2 months, cloud auto-updated clinical code sets in HealthDataHub are going to be available. So we want to do some of that heavy lifting. But as part of any kind of responsible management of an HIE is the management of local codes. So local codes from a hospital or a specific data source where they have a different code set for provider identification or immunization records or so on, you still can do and should do the local code mapping to the standard terminology code sets. Curtis, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the other things to really talk about is that, there is a lot of this that can be done systematically, programmatically there's groups out there, Google and Microsoft and a few others have really great tools there. Part of the platform is that we can start to bring some of those in and have them help us. But I think you're right that it doesn't absolve data contributors from doing their best to already start mapping to those standardized code sets so that they, already are in there, and it takes the burden off the HIE, even though that could be one of their core competencies.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next question, Curtis. Are you using any particular markup tools for your metadata? And I think that question was around the event sourcing slide that you mentioned.
So right now our markup is pretty open. We use JSON. It's pretty simple. It allows us to extend to whatever our needs may be and expand and contract based on what the requirements of the system is. And so for that, we just use JSON nomenclature, and it's kind of a custom schema from that perspective.
Excellent. Next question is HealthDataHub being used in other facilities in Arizona, other HIEs, where else? So I'll take a crack at this one. What's awesome about working for a technology company like Nextgen is we often get the opportunity to use our own platforms. And so everything that you saw today with HealthDataHub is something we've built for selling to the market and making available to customers. But we also eat our own dog food, as we say in the technology world. Curtis refined that phrase for me and said, no, we drink our own champagne.
Exactly.
I don't know what you like better, but we use HealthDataHub at Nextgen to deliver interoperability services to our customers. So HealthDataHub is in use, yes, in other HIEs, like for example, Santa Cruz HIE in California uses HealthDataHub. The Department of Healthcare Services for the state of California also uses HealthDataHub. And we have many other customers coming online with this platform. But going back to our use at Nextgen, we use it for a platform called Nextgen Share to do care quality and payer data exchange across all of the Nextgen ambulatory EHR network, where in the Nextgen Share platform, we have 170 million patients for whom we have data stored in HealthDataHub so that we can connect to care quality and other data exchange platforms. So yes, this platform, although new, is getting some really exciting traction, and we're really proud of where we're going with it. And I think that might be the last question that I see on the slides or on the screen. One new question that actually just came in. And the last question, Curtis, is there a hover to discover kind of feature in HealthDataHub? Does that exist?
So certainly right now we have the concept of tooltips. So if you hover over something, it will give you more information. Some of the things we're working on right now are going to be a little different than hover to discover. The idea would be that I think hover discover is the idea you hover over something, you might see a preview. That's something we're working at. The other thing that we're working on is a free text search. So once you get to that patient summary, you start typing in CBC or complete blood, and it just kind of pre-filters for that based on a free text search. And so certainly these are things that we are working on, we've thought about, and we want to add as we go to the system.
I was wrong. There's one more question, Curtis. I'm going to give you this one. Is blockchain part of this solution?
So blockchain is not a part of the solution because that is a, quote, distributed ledger system. We use a non-distributed or a centralized ledger system. But it's the same principle in how we do it. And so one thing that's really great about that is that if we wanted to add blockchain to the system and move to a more distributed ledger model, that's certainly something we could do very easily because we use the very same fundamental principles in our data store.
Excellent. Curtis, thank you so much. Great job fielding those questions. Excellent demo. And thank you everybody for joining us. What a great opportunity that we've had to chat with you today. Thank you for the great questions. If you do have any other questions and you'd like to learn more, please reach out to us at results@nextgen.com. Thank you all and have a great day.